The bright side of addiction is recovery. If you are in recovery or know or love someone who is, or simply want to know more about the recovery process, this is the podcast for you. In this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast, we're going to hear from a Canadian singer-songwriter who is a true traveling troubadour. He's been on the road for many, many years, and the road led him to a life of hard drinking and bad health. And eventually, he was hospitalized with alcoholic pancreatitis. It was a moment of clarity and a moment of awakening as he was facing possible death. He turned his life around and is now grateful for the lessons learned and his newfound life in long-term recovery. His name is Scott Cook. And speaking of long-term recovery, what does President Biden think of the recovery community? Is he even aware of how many people in this country are living a life of renewal, a life of long-term recovery? Well, he recently made his feelings known about addiction and recovery. I think you'll find them quite interesting. In this podcast, we will share those comments with you. We'll also share some reflections on recovery from a great actor who's in long-term recovery, Lou Gossett Jr. He will talk about maturity and spirituality. I'm Neil Scott, host of Recovery Coast to Coast. Our website is recoverycoasttocoast.org. That's recoverycoasttocoast.org. Following 15 years of nightly broadcasting on iHeartRadio in Seattle, we have now upgraded to a national podcast, available to anyone at any time, featuring interviews with everyday people in recovery, as well as clinicians, authors, and recovering celebrities and newsmakers as well, offering the promise of hope and the reality of recovery. Plus, well-vetted resources for individuals, families, and friends. We invite you to enjoy the podcast and to share it with your friends as well. Recovery is an American way of life. If you'd like to get in touch with us, and we would love to hear from you, our email is recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Again, recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Recovery Coast to Coast is supported by Sundown M Ranch, one of the oldest and truly most successful and affordable addiction treatment programs in America. They have successfully treated well over 200,000 adolescents, adults, and families for the past 54-plus years. One of the oldest programs in the country. It's where recovery becomes a reality. And a lot of people ask me why I talk about Sundown all the time. Well, for starters, they provide excellent treatment, and they are exceptionally affordable. Last week, I referred a young man to Sundown, and I did so with the confidence that he will get the best possible care. Will he win his battle with addiction? Who knows? What I do know is that there isn't a better place to try. The odds are certainly in his favor, and I know that he will be given the tools necessary to begin and hopefully maintain his ongoing recovery. Sundown has a great staff, too, by the way. They've been together for a long time. That's very important in looking for a treatment center. In fact, some of their staff actually went through the Sundown program themselves and are in long-term recovery. The Sundown philosophy of treatment it's pretty simple and pretty basic and pretty successful. Disrupt the disease, provide much-needed medical and social support in the recovery process, and carefully guide the individual back to a healthy and productive life. And by the way, their remote location in beautiful eastern Washington is awesome. It's located right at the mouth of the beautiful Yakima River Canyon, serenity personified. Check out their website, sundown.org. It's where recovery becomes reality. Here now is my interview with that fascinating singer-songwriter I was telling you about who has successfully worked his own personal program of recovery. His name is Scott Cook. Canadian songwriter Scott Cook is our guest this time around. He's a great singer, he's a writer, he's a lover of the road. His CD is included in a 246-page CD-sized book. Man, you got to see this thing. You got to listen to this thing. You got to read this thing. It's called Tangle of Souls, and it includes a couple of interesting tracks. Scott is a guy in long term recovery, and he's written a lot of songs, some that reflect his recovery. What to Keep is one of them. Also, another story inspired by his unique recovery, which is called Tulsa. We're going to talk about those in this segment. And since we are not allowed to use published music in a podcast, I will have links in the show notes to these songs and YouTube, so you will be able to hear Scott Cook singing as well as in the interview. Scott's a person in long term recovery. Everyone's recovery story obviously is different. Everyone's path to recovery is different. Now, some recover through medical treatment, others through the 12-step community, and others follow a faith based path. Some simply just decide to not drink anymore. We don't judge how a person finds recovery. We just celebrate that a person is in recovery and that they're doing well. With all that, we welcome songwriter Scott Cook, currently touring the Pacific Northwest. You can go to his website and find out all the details in the Pacific Northwest as well as around the country. He's going to be touring this summer with his trio. If he's coming to a city near you, get your tickets early. He is sure to sell out. And if you're in the Seattle area, one of his shows will be at the Birdsong Theater, which is, by the way, an amazing outdoor backyard venue. You can find out about that at birdsongtheater.com. Great to talk to you again, Scott, and looking forward to seeing you this weekend. Tell me what life is like on the road these days following the COVID chaos.
Yeah, it's been an interesting time to be touring for sure. We left home at the beginning of January. It's been really different state to state, in terms of what people's expectations are, or whether they even thought there was a pandemic or what have you. Yeah, I've found, and I'm hearing the same from a lot of my comrades, that audiences have been a little slow to return. My crowd tends to lean left and older as well. Folks have been understandably scared to venture back out, but we are seeing a lot of people at their first show that they're coming back out for. Feels like a special moment to be in, to be sharing with people.
We're going to get to some of the stories about your music, but I wanted to invite you to Recovery Coast to Coast so you can share your recovery path, which is perhaps a little different from others. Let's begin with the backstory, Scott, which I know involved a case of alcoholic pancreatitis, which was certainly a moment of reckoning for you. Take us back, if you would, to the problems that developed as a result of overuse of alcohol.
As it turned out, that pancreatitis was the best thing that could have happened to me, really, just because it helped turn my life around.
When was that?
That was in October of 2017. Yeah, up till that point, I had been drinking too much for a good, at least 20 years. It came quite naturally with the lifestyle involved with touring. And really, I felt like I used it as a crutch to overcome some social anxieties, kind of just keep myself on a bit of a emotional baseline. A lot of times I was feeling alone. A lot of times just feeling tired and feeling like I didn't want to engage with a group of folks in a bar. Used that as a crutch to prop myself up in a certain frame of mind, I guess, in headspace.
Did it interfere at all with the music, with the performing, with the writing?
Yeah, at times with the performing, certainly. Yeah, I tended to be pretty professional, like not to let myself be sloppy on stage. But there was definitely times where I was. Yeah, and there were just times when I was feeling awful because of what I'd done to myself the night before or whatever. Other times just where I think I sabotaged myself, from a business perspective by being unreliable or stuff I would do after hours. Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing was the performance. I didn't really notice until after. I would always have a couple beers before I got on stage just because I had struggled with stage fright, and that was the tactic I used and had used for as long as I could remember to get around that. Yeah, it wasn't until after I got out of the hospital, going on stage totally sober, that I realized there's something has been missing this whole time, because I guess feeling like I wanted to take the edge off, in hindsight I was like, wow, the edge is really a good place to be. Like it's great to be fully present with the audience and not to have one foot in the party. In a way it was a way of me not really meaning what I was saying. In a way it was kind of me hedging my bet, not really being there completely and not really getting behind what I was saying completely. So I felt like a different thing happened once I started performing sober. Yeah, it was something that I was missing before.
Before you were hospitalized, was there anyone in your inner circle, friends, family, that said, Scott, you need to do something about your drinking?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, family and friends. I was a pretty happy drunk, for the most part, I was a friendly guy to be around. Um, so it wasn't like there was a chorus of such voices, but there was definitely friends who expressed concern. I think, as you get older too, like in my 20s and 30s, when all my friends were doing the same, it seemed a lot more harmless. As I got into my 40s, yeah, people start to make different sorts of choices in life, and it starts to wear on you. Like I started slipping more. Um,
What led up to the hospitalization?
oh, it was quite abrupt. I was just one day I woke up and I guess for a little while before that there was times I had been kind of trying to moderate my drinking and get on a more of an even keel. So I would have stretches of that kind of punctuated by benders, and I started noticing that I wasn't, on the day after a hard night, I would not be sobering up at the normal rate. It seemed like I wasn't processing alcohol at the normal rate. So I kind of noticed that, and then one day I went on a bender. The following day, I just didn't feel well all day, and I tried a breathalyzer, and I was still blowing over. Yeah, I fell asleep that night, and I woke up the next day feeling worse, and then really suddenly in really unbearable pain, and went to the hospital, and they diagnosed it as pancreatitis fairly quickly. It's the worst pain I've been in my life. They were pretty sure right away that it had to do with the drinking.
How long were you in the hospital?
I was hospitalized for 4 days. I begged them to let me out because I was really uncomfortable in there, and because I had a gig to do actually. So we went down to Calgary. My bandmate drove me down to Calgary that weekend for a festival, which I could barely complete. I was still in a lot of pain, but I wanted to be there. I wanted to do it, and then I was right back into the swing of things with gigs and everything. I had a tour in Ontario, and then I had a tour in Australia shortly after that. The plane tickets were already bought and everything was booked. So I was then just, touring right away, but trying to find my way back to health, particularly with my diet, because pancreatitis, it means you're really unable to process fat. So I had to really radically shift my diet, and I had a couple kind of recurrences of the disease. Yeah, it was a scary time to be out touring, but it really reminded me, and maybe even made me come to see in a deeper way what were the reasons that I was doing this in the first place, without the drinks and smokes and the party, without that side of it, to just kind of reassess whether I felt like this was worth doing, or whether it was a worthwhile way of spending my life. Yeah, and also really made me really grateful for the friends who were out there on those tours that I was who took care of me. And
What was it like during that first year performing sober in terms of your feelings on stage and in terms of your writing? How did that change?
In terms of the feelings on stage, it felt clearer. It felt more real. I think it was interesting to navigate being around situations with a lot of people drinking, because you really notice that other people are under the influence if you're not. Intoxicated people came to feel really unpredictable to me in a way that they didn't before. So yeah, it was interesting to navigate being in those situations, and also just learning what to do with my hands, or how to just chill out and be in a social situation. In terms of the writing, I guess, yeah, there were some hard things that I hadn't really wanted to tackle yet. As you said, what to keep. That was the first song that came out of all that. It's a real serious reckoning, maybe, that I wasn't ready to come to before that. Tulsa is one that I wrote back when I was still kind of in the throes of things. Some songs I feel like that was my one part of me trying to talk to another part of me trying to save myself. Just being hospitalized. And as I kind of went through the process of writing the book and writing some more of the songs for the book, I came to see some bigger kind of thematic parallels. And there's a song called "Let Love Have Its Way," which has to do with that, which just has to do with the sense in which I guess our culture at large seems to be addicted to various things, including just consumption. Just like the doctors were telling me, you need to tone down your drinking, like you're going to hurt yourself. We as a society keep being told by scientists, like, no, we can't. There are limits to this planetary system, and we're outrunning them all, and we're headed for a crash. In a way, I guess it kind of takes a big event sometimes to wake people up. It sure took that for me.
Well, we talked about what it was like that first year performing, that first year writing, but what was it like in that first year basically touring? Now, as a touring musician, venues, events, parties can be slippery places. How did you navigate during that first year the venues, the availability of alcohol and drugs for a musician, which is pretty evident around the music scene?
Mm. Um, yeah, I found it relatively easy, I suppose, not to drink. I know everybody's situation is different. I don't think I don't have the real serious trauma in my past that a lot of people who struggle with addiction have. So I wouldn't even want to generalize from my experience to other people's experience. Yeah, in my case, having been told that I could land back in the hospital with this, it just scared me. It was so painful, and it was so kind of, it felt so tragic to have had everything I wanted in life, and just to mess it up. I didn't want to go back there, so it was pretty easy for me not to drink. There was no doubt in my mind about that choice. As I said, just kind of being in social situations. Yeah, I found myself like quick to leave parties and just had a hard time sitting still. And it was just learning to readjust. But that was one way to just kind of park myself in familiar situations that I was used to being in without actually drinking.
Tell me about putting together Tangle of Souls. And as I mentioned before, it is an amazing project. It's a book, but it's basically the size of a CD. It has a CD. It's got 12 tremendous songs on there. And the book is 246 pages. How long did it take you to write this? I mean, it's very, very personal, very intimate. What was that like, putting that together? And what was the process in putting it together?
Yeah, thanks for reading it. It was a labor of love. I had written a smaller book, mostly a picture book, to go with my previous album further down the line. So I already had in mind this idea of making a hardcover book. With further down the line, it was talking about 10 years on the road and the decision that I took in the first place when I decided to move into a minivan and be a full-time folk singer. So with this book, I thought, well, I guess I'm going to talk about what's happened over the last 3 years with, of course, this whole hospitalization and change of lifestyle being the biggest part of that, and how that all sort of related to my own thoughts about my own fictive, self-destructive kind of traits and my own shadow. Thinking about all those things, I thought I would take each song as a jumping off point for each chapter to kind of explore some of those themes. Yeah, I went to Taiwan in December of 2019 and took a month off to go there and try and do the writing. I had started working on it in Australia before that. Yeah, in Taiwan, I got the chapters fleshed out. A month really isn't a long time, and then I was right into tour in New Zealand, and then back to Canada, and I had about a month to work on it, and still didn't wrap it up, and then I had to hit the road. That was the tour that never was. I made it as far as Austin, and then I had to turn around and come back home. As it turned out, it was really, it was good timing because I had the time to really put into fleshing out those ideas and doing the editing and talking to friends who could call me on various places where they didn't quite believe what I was saying, or maybe I was unclear as to what I was saying. So it ended up taking, I guess, about 4 months really in total to do the writing, and then the graphic design and all that sort of stuff. So the album actually came out in August of 2020. So yeah, it felt like the biggest project I've ever done.
Well, it's one of the most beautiful presentations with the hardback, with the book, with the CD. It's absolutely amazing. And as you go out now and begin in earnest to travel and tour with your partner Pamela, and then I guess with a trio this summer, I'm sure that people are going to be delighted to not only listen to the CD but to read the story, the refreshing honesty and intimacy that's reflected in Tangle of Souls. You wrote that a couple of years ago, but are you writing now? What is the writing process for Scott Cook today? Do songs come to you? Do you have a way to sit down and a disciplined process? What is songwriting like for you today?
Oh, I squeeze them out of a stone. I wish they just came to me. Started this about a year ago. I started up a Patreon page where I committed to write and record and release a new song each month to my
Wow,
supporters on there.
that's ambitious.
And yeah, it is for me because in the past I write about 4 songs a year. It's about my normal output. So it has been ambitious. If I don't actually finish it, then I pause the payment for that month. So that's been a self-imposed sort of incentive to keep working at the writing. So far, I guess I've probably turned out 9, I think, on there. Not all of them are created equal, of course, but a few of them are real keepers, I think. It's been good to have that kind of driving my daily return to it anyway. Not every day, but most days I'm at least thinking about a song.
You've been in recovery for, I believe, 5 years this coming October. What is life like for you today, Scott? You have a new relationship with Pamela. You're back touring. You're back singing. You're back writing. Tell me about how recovery has influenced you today.
I'm a different person than I was. I feel grateful all the time for that, and also just that kind of having an abrupt event like that turning me around. Yeah, it gave me the opportunity really to make a dramatic pivot, rather than kind of a long downhill slide of self-sabotage and declining health, But I'll never be drunk again, and that's for the best for me. As I said earlier, everyone's journey's different, and I wouldn't even want to generalize from my own experience, but I sure am. I'm just super grateful that I had the opportunity to turn around, and also just that I had the supports in my life, that I had people around me who cared about me, and I had things to grab onto, that I had a life and a career and family and all the things that make life worth sticking around. I feel fortunate, I guess is what I mean to say, because I know a lot of people come from way harder
I certainly look forward to seeing you this weekend. I have been a big fan of yours for many years. I think the first time we met was at Far West, one of the Far West music conferences. So I'm
Hmm.
excited to see
Yeah.
you again this weekend. And for people who are listening and want to know more about Scott Cook, you can certainly go to his website, scottcook.net. As far as music goes, I will put into the show notes my favorite 5 songs from Scott Cook, which are further down the line. Fellas, get out the way, pass it along. Say, can you see? You got to listen to the lyrics of that one. And what to leave behind. And again, we'll have a link to these 5 favorites. And definitely see Scott when he's in your area. You can find out where he's touring by going to scottcook.net. And as far as the Patreon page, and that's pretty amazing, just go to www.patreon.com/Scott Cook Songs. And again, he's trying to do 1 song a month, which is pretty amazing. Scott, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you and hearing you this weekend.
Thanks so much for the chat, Neil. Yeah, looking forward to seeing you.
I'm going to put a few of Scott's songs in the program notes so you'll have a chance to hear this amazing singer-songwriter. And as I mentioned earlier, President Biden recently let his feelings be known about addiction and the community of recovery. I think you may be surprised. Let's give a listen.
So much we can do. Increased funding for prevention, treatment, harm reduction, and recovery. Get rid of outdated rules and stop doctors that stop doctors prescribing treatments. Stop the flow of illicit drugs by working with state and local law enforcement to go after the traffickers. And if you're suffering from addiction, you should know you're not alone. I believe in recovery, and I celebrate the 23 million Americans in recovery.
We will be right back with actor Lou Gossett Jr. He has a thought for the day on maturity and spirituality.
The spiritual way of life has made it possible for us to become mature in ways we could not have imagined. Most of the time, our behavior and reactions reflect the inner peace and security we have gained. We can face and deal with life changes and challenges. We're stable and sure of ourselves. How did this come about? What's the connection between spirituality and maturity? When we first learn about spiritual principles, we see that they offer solutions to our living problems. We soon begin to apply these principles day by day with good results. In a typical scenario, our initial impulse when affronted may be to strike back, to get even, to become resentful. Instead, we stop ourselves and try to respond maturely, with understanding, patience, and self-restraint to whatever has provoked us. Over time, the connection that we may not have seen earlier becomes quite clear. By practicing spiritual principles in our responses and our actions, by shifting focus from ourselves to others and God, we're able to move steadily from immaturity to maturity. Thought for today: the spiritual path leads to greater maturity.
Back in 30 seconds.
Are you afraid? Afraid of life without drugs and alcohol? There is help and hope at Sundown M Ranch. At Sundown, the focus is on you and your disease. You will learn how to live without depending on drugs and alcohol. Sundown M Ranch is nationally recognized for effective and affordable alcohol and drug treatment programs. Reclaim your life. Replace your fears with hope. Go to www.sundown.org right now to learn more.
As we close out this podcast, we would appreciate it if you could kindly tell 1 or 2 of your friends about our podcast. That also really helps us to carry the message of hope and the promise of recovery, especially on social media. Our Twitter handle, by the way, RC2C Podcast. And a reminder, if you know someone who is struggling with problems involving alcohol or any other drug, there's a toll-free number where you can reach out in complete confidence for information and treatment referrals. They also have a Spanish-speaking individual available as well. The number is 1-800-662-HELP, which is 1-800-662-4357. And join us next time for America's Voice for Recovery, Recovery Coast to Coast. And another shout-out to our sponsoring organization, Sundown M Ranch, successfully treating individuals, including adolescents and their families, for well over 54 years. Sundown.org. I'm Neil Scott reminding you to stay healthy, live in gratitude, and be kind to others.